In the gritty streets of 1980s New York, Nico Romano, the son of struggling Italian immigrants, discovers a gift for fashion design while working in his father's tailor shop. Determined to escape poverty and his family's criminal entanglements, Nico plunges into the cutthroat world of haute couture. But as a star rises, he's pulled into a dark web of rival designers, mobsters laundering money through fashion houses, and secrets that'll destroy him. Will Nico's talent be enough to build an empire, or will his past consume him? Welcome to Stories Box, where every tale unlocks a new world. Dive into stories that stay with you long after the last word. Subscribe, sit back, and step into our binge-worthy story, because the best moments begin with once upon a time. Little Italy, New York City, 1984. The air outside Romano Taylor's smelled of fresh bread from the corner bakery and the bitter tang of hot asphalt. Inside the cramped shop, Nico Romano hunched over a vintage Singer sewing machine, fingers dancing across worn fabric under a single swaying bulb. He was 17, but already bore the sharp cheekbones and stormy eyes of his mother, Rosa. The needle hissed in and out of the cloth, a rhythm as old as the family name. His father, Salvatore, stood by the iron press, sleeves rolled to his elbows, cursing softly in Sicilian as steam rose around him. Outside, the sidewalks bustled with suits, dresses, and briefcases, but inside these cracked brick walls, time felt frozen in another century. Nico had lived every moment of his life inside the shop's shadows. He'd learned to read patterns before he'd learned to read words. He could name every type of stitch blindfolded. Yet it was a tattered sketchbook hidden under the cutting table that contained his true gift. Dresses that looked like they'd leapt off Italian Renaissance paintings. Suits that would make kings envious. Raw lines, yes, but brilliant. That afternoon, Rosa Romano stormed in. Red hair pinned back like a crown, voice sharp enough to cut silk. She tossed the day's receipts on the counter. "They're coming by tonight," she hissed in Italian, eyes flicking to Nico before softening. "We don't talk. We don't look. We don't trust anyone outside this family. Ever." Salvatore only nodded, jaw clenched. He caught Nico's gaze for a moment before returning to the iron. Nico knew what his father's silence meant. Something was wrong. Minutes later, the shop's bell jingled and a hush fell over the room. A tall woman swept in with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Her ivory coat trailed behind her like a bridal train. Claudia Bellini, the queen of Fifth Avenue fashion, surveyed the tailor shop as if it were a crime scene. "This is where you work?" she sneered, eyes landing on Nico. He looked up from his machine, heart pounding. He knew who she was. Everyone in the neighborhood did. Bellini Couture was a pinnacle of design, worn by the most powerful people in Manhattan. "My father's shop," Nico said, voice steadier than he felt. Claudia smirked. "A quaint little cave. How very old country. Do you stitch potato sacks here, or do you dare try something finer?" Anger flared behind Rosa's eyes, but she said nothing. Nico's hands curled into fists on the table. Claudia's eyes flicked to a scrap of paper sticking out from under a bolt of fabric. His sketchbook. She pulled it free with a sharp motion. She flipped through the pages, her scoff turning into a thoughtful silence. Dresses like storms, suits like knives, each page more daring than the last. Her eyes darted to Nico, calculating. "These are yours?" she asked. He hesitated. "Yes." A slow, dangerous smile spread across her lips. "Interesting." Before Nico could answer, a black Lincoln Town car screeched to a stop outside. Two men in dark suits stepped out. One carried an envelope stained dark red at the edges. Rosa went pale. "Back," she whispered. "Now." But Nico froze in place, eyes wide as the men entered. One stayed by the door, hand inside his coat. The other walked straight to Salvatore, pressing the bloody envelope into his palm. "You know what happens if you don't pay." The man growled. Salvatore's hands trembled. I need more time." "You have none," the thug snapped. "The Don is done waiting." Claudia watched, eyes gleaming with a mixture of disgust and fascination. "How delightfully medieval," she purred. "Fashion and blood. New York really is a village, isn't it?" Salvatore caught Nico's eyes, voice breaking. "Go. Now. But Nico couldn't move. He watched the men leave, the shop door swinging shut behind them. The envelope in his father's hands dripped onto floorboards. A single drop of blood spread across the wood grain like a blooming rose. Claudia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I can take you away from all this," she said. "I see your talent. I can make you something. But you'll need to leave this filth behind." Nico's heart slammed against his ribs. Could he really walk away? Could he leave Rosa, Salvatore's entire past, behind? His mind screamed yes. His heart wasn't so sure. The bell over the door jingled again. Nico looked up, but the shop was empty except for 3 of them. Then he realized the envelope was gone. His father had slipped into the back room, taking it with him. A moment later, Nico heard voices. His father speaking in low, frantic tones to someone hidden in the shadows beyond the beaded curtain. He crept to the doorway, every instinct telling him to run. But curiosity chained his feet, pulling the curtain back a hair. He caught a glimpse of his father pressing the bloody envelope into the hands of a tall figure with slick-back hair and eyes like ice. "Victor will not wait," the stranger said coldly. Nico swallowed hard. Victor. He knew that name. The one whispered in alleyways late at night. The one the old men in the neighborhood used to frighten children into obedience. He forced himself to breathe quietly, but the stranger's gaze suddenly snapped toward the curtain. Nico stepped back into the shadows just as a knife of moonlight cut across the man's face, revealing a thin scar along his jaw. The curtain dropped back into place. Nico turned and found Claudia right behind him, her eyes wide with excitement rather than fear. "Oh, darling," she breathed. "You're far more interesting than I thought." Her perfume filled his nose, sickly sweet, overwhelming. She leaned in close enough for him to feel her breath on his cheek. "Don't worry about your father," she whispered. "Worry about yourself." A cold shiver ran through him. He wanted to ask what she meant, but footsteps in the back room sent him scurrying to his work table. Salvatore reemerged, face pale, hands empty. Claudia smiled, a sharp, knowing smile. She slipped out of the shop, the bell's jingle echoing long after the door shut behind her. Nico met his father's eyes. There was only fear there now, fear and resignation. The storm had begun, and Nico knew it was only a matter of time before it swallowed them all. Nico didn't sleep that night. His dreams were filled with Claudia's cutting smile and the cold eyes of the scarred man. The streets outside the shop fell quiet long before dawn, but the shadows seemed thicker than ever. He sat hunched over his sketchbook, candlelight dancing across his restless hands. Designs poured from his pencil, dresses like flowing rivers of midnight, jackets as sharp as razors. But the paper felt inadequate, unable to hold the storm brewing in his mind. As dawn broke, Nico wrapped his father's old coat around himself and slipped out. He had a plan, desperate, maybe foolish, but it was the only way forward. Claudia's words echoed in his head. "I can take you away from all this." He needed her to see his work, not just a glimpse in the shop, but something that would stop her cold. And she would be at tonight's show, the Bellini Fall Collection at the Grand Ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, a place where nobility, celebrities, and sharks in designer suits gathered. He wasn't invited, of course, but he knew every service entrance to the old hotel from the delivery runs he'd done with Salvatore. As he reached the hotel that evening, a sleek line of limousines spilled models, editors, and socialites onto the red carpet. Paparazzi lights strobed against the night sky. Nico pulled his cap low and slipped into the alley, where kitchen workers smoked under the dim glow of a rusted lamp. Inside, the backstage area was a chaos of racks overflowing with silk, makeup artists barking orders, and stylists wrestling with uncooperative zippers. Models towered over him, eyes hollow with hunger and nerves. He felt invisible, and for now that was good. He moved through the labyrinth of rolling racks until he reached the main dressing area. There she was, Claudia Bellini, wrapped in a black satin gown, shouting at a cowering assistant over misaligned hem. Her presence sucked the air from the room. Nico scanned the tables until he found an empty mannequin. Heart hammering, he pulled his sketchbook from inside his coat, flipping to his most daring design, a backless evening dress cut in fluid panels like shattered glass, bold yet graceful. He grabbed stray fabric, a shimmering onyx silk, scissors, pins. His hands flew. Time vanished. Each cut and fold felt guided by something deeper than thought. He stitched until the mannequin wore his dream, and the room fell silent as onlookers noticed the dress rising like a dark phoenix. Who made this? Claudia's voice cracked like a whip. She stalked toward him, eyes locked on creation. Who dares? Then she saw him. Nico stood trembling but defiant, needle still in hand. You! She breathed, awe and fury warring in her eyes. Before she could speak again, a crashing sound tore through the tension. A rolling rack toppled, scattering dresses across the floor. Gasps rose. Two men in tailored suits, Victor's men, stormed to the backstage crowd like wolves through sheep. One grabbed Nico's arm, twisting painfully. Thought you could hide? The man snarled, breath reeking of stale coffee. Claudia snapped her fingers. Get him out of my sight, she ordered, face suddenly cold. But Victor's men hesitated. He's coming with us, the thug growled. Victor wants to see him. Before they could drag him away, a woman stepped between them. A model with fierce green eyes and a shock of dark hair, Julia. She kneed the man in the groin, sending him sprawling. The other lunged at her, but she ducked under his arm, grabbed Nico's hand, and pulled him into a sprint. They crashed through a door into the hotel kitchens. Pans clanged as cooks shouted curses. Julia led him through a maze of steaming pots and out into the main ballroom shadows, where the show had already begun. Models glided down the catwalk, oblivious to the storm brewing backstage. Why are you helping me? Nico gasped as they ducked behind a pillar. She looked back, breathless but calm. Because I've been where you are. Victor owns me too, but maybe you can end it. Security guards spilled from every entrance, radios crackling. Julia pulled Nico through the swirling chaos of the ballroom floor, knocking over champagne flutes as startled socialites shrieked. He caught glimpses of Claudia on stage, face frozen in fury as she tried to salvage the show. They reached the service stairwell, pounding down flight after flight. The roar of the ballroom faded behind them. They burst into the dark alley behind the hotel, lungs burning. Rain began to fall, washing the sweat from Nico's face. I need my sketches, he gasped. Julia pulled a folded bundle from her purse. His sketchbook. I grabbed it when they went for you, she said, eyes blazing. Now run. They sprinted together, splashing through puddles as sirens wailed blocks away. The city seemed to close in, its towering walls channeling them deeper into its shadows. They ducked into a narrow doorway, pressed together in the darkness. Nico could feel her heartbeat racing against his. The adrenaline in his veins made every second feel like a lifetime. Suddenly, the door behind them creaked open. A silhouette filled the frame, tall, broad-shouldered, the faint gleam of a knife catching the streetlight. Victor himself stepped into the alley, eyes like black ice. You made quite the mess, Ragazzo, he said softly, voice deadlier than a shout. The alley flashed with lightning as Victor's knife caught the light. Nico grabbed Julia's hand and pulled her aside just as Victor lunged. The blade missed by an inch, sparks flying as it scraped the brick wall. Rain poured in sheets, drumming the pavement like machine gun fire. Victor came again, faster than Nico expected, but Julia kicked a trash can into his path, sending him stumbling. Run, she shouted, yanking Nico's arm. They bolted down the alley, weaving between dumpsters as thunder shook the city. Nico's mind raced. Who else had seen him backstage? Who else believed he was the one who ruined Claudia's show? His sketches were still safe in Julia's bag, but for how long? They reached Canal Street, headlights sweeping across them as cars sped past. Julia flagged down a cab, shoving Nico inside. Go, she yelled. But as the cab pulled away, Nico watched in horror as two men grabbed Julia from behind, dragging her screaming into the shadows. Stop! He pounded on the plexiglass, but the cabbie only stepped on the gas. Turn around, please. No way. The driver barked, eyes wide with terror. Not my problem. Nico watched helplessly as Julia's figure disappeared into the storm. The cab dropped him a few blocks from the shop. He sprinted the rest of the way, rainwater soaking him to the bone. Romano Taylor's was dark, except for a flickering light in the back. He burst inside, panting, heart hammering like a drum. "Papa? Mama?" he called. Silence answered. He crept through the shop, water dripping from his hair. The back room door stood ajar. He pushed it open and found Rosa crouched on the floor, clutching a torn piece of sketchbook, eyes swollen from crying. "Where were you?" she rasped. "They came for you, Victor's men. I told them nothing. I swear." Nico helped at her feet. "I know, Mama. I know." She gripped his face with shaking hands. "Nico, listen to me. You must leave. Tonight, before your father returns." His chest went cold. "Where is he?" She hesitated. "Salvatore. He's meeting the Don's men. He thinks he can buy you time, but he's walking into a trap." Before Nico could respond, the shop bell jingled. He shoved Rosa behind a rack of coats just as two uniformed officers stepped inside, water dripping from their hats. "Nico Romano," the taller cop called out, "you're under arrest." Nico's heart sank. "For what?" The officer held up a scorched scrap of fabric in an evidence bag. The charred remains of a Bellini gown. "Arson. Bellini's mansion went up in flames last night. Witnesses place you near the scene." Nico's head spun. He'd been backstage all night. Could Victor have set him up? Or was Claudia framing him to protect herself? The cops cuffed him roughly and led him outside. Neighbors peeked from their windows as the rain washed over the flashing red and blue lights. Rosa's sobs echoed behind him as the squad car doors slammed shut. At the precinct, they threw him into an interrogation room lit by a single buzzing bulb. Detectives took turns hammering him with questions. "Who paid you to torch Bellini's home? Are you working for the Romano crime family? Did your father order the hit?" Nico's voice cracked as he tried to explain. He'd only wanted to show his designs, nothing more. But every word felt useless against their cold stares. Hours passed. His head lolled against the table. Then the door creaked open and a woman stepped inside, tall, severe, wearing a trench coat over a black dress. Claudia Bellini. Nico's eyes widened. "What are you?" Claudia cut him off with a gesture. "Leave us," she told the detectives, who obeyed instantly. She circled the table like a predator. "Do you know what you've done?" she hissed. "My reputation is in ashes. The press thinks I orchestrated the fire to collect insurance. My investors are fleeing. I didn't set that fire." Nico shot back. "You know it." Claudia slammed her palms on the table, leaning so close he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes. "You think I care about your innocence? You embarrass me. And now you're going to fix it." She pulled a ticket from her coat and slid it across the table. "A one-way flight to Milan. You will come to Italy and design for my next show. You will do so under my name. And when it's over, you'll disappear. Or the police will find something very damning in your sketchbook." Nico's stomach twisted. "You'd steal my work?" She smiled faintly. "I'd save you. There's a difference." Just then, a voice crackled over the precinct intercom. "Rosa Romano is here." Claudia's eyes flashed. She straightened. "I'll give you time to think," she purred, slipping out the door. Moments later, Rosa burst into the room, hair plastered to her face, eyes wild. She pressed a wad of damn bills into Nico's cuffed hands. Take it and run." He stared at her, torn between rage, fear, and love. "Mama, what about you?" She kissed his forehead. "We're already dead here." Before he could protest, a pair of officers shoved Rosa back. As she screamed for him, they dragged Nico down a corridor toward the cells. His mind reeled. He couldn't stay here. He couldn't leave Rosa behind. And above all, he couldn't let Claudia win. Then he heard a voice, a quiet conversation drifting through a half-open office door as they passed. "Yes, Miss Bellini," a detective was saying into the phone. "We'll plant the evidence in the boy's sketchbook tonight." Nico's blood froze. The roar of jet engines rattled the small cabin as Nico's flight banked over Milan. He peered down to the rain-streaked window. Centuries-old spires jutted skyward, wreathed in mist. Somewhere below, Claudia's empire waited, and his only chance to save his mother. He stepped off the plane clutching his battered sketchbook. Two suited men flanked him before he reached customs, Bellini's men. Their silence was more menacing than words. They whisked him into a sleek black car, driving to the twisting streets until marble buildings gave way to glass towers. They arrived at the Bellini Villa, a sprawling estate perched on the edge of the city. Ivy crept along stone walls. Security cameras tracked his every step as he entered. Claudia was waiting in a grand foyer, dressed in an ivory pantsuit that turned her into a statue of cold elegance. "You're late," she said, voice sharp as cut crystal. "My flight—" "Excuses." She tossed him a leather-bound folder. "Your assignment. 20 looks for my Milan show. You have 3 weeks. He flipped through the pages. Sketches stolen from his own notebook, now stamped with her name. "Julia," he blurted. "Where is she?" Claudia smiled faintly. "Safe for now. But remember, Nico, your design's by her life. Fail, and I'll send what's left of her back to New York in a box." Rage boiled in his veins, but he swallowed it down. For Julia, for Rosa, he would play Claudia's game, at least until he found a way out. The next days blurred into sleepless nights. He worked in a studio overlooking the Duomo spires, hemmed in by guards who tracked his every move. His hands ached from pinning, stitching, sketching. His only comfort was the sight of Julia's favorite bracelet, tossed carelessly onto a table in Claudia's office. Proof she was alive. On the 4th day, Claudia introduced him to her Milan team, a swarm of stylists, photographers, and assistants who eyed him with suspicion. One stood out, a wiry man with a cigarette permanently dangling from his lips. Enzo Russo, a rival designer famous for his cutthroat ambition. "You're the American?" Enzo sneered, eyes flicking to Nico's torn jeans. Claudia must be desperate. Nico held his gaze. Or smart. Enzo smirked but said nothing more. Yet as the days wore on, he began lingering near Nico's table, watching him work with a hungry gleam. One night, Nico escaped the balcony for fresh air. The city lights shimmered like fallen stars below. His mind swirled with half-formed plans and fragments of designs. Then he heard soft footsteps behind him. A woman emerged from the shadows, tall, fierce green eyes, and a long coat pulled tight against the chill. "Julia." Before he could speak, she pressed a finger to his lips. "Quiet," she whispered. "They think I'm locked up, but I slipped my guard." He pulled her into an embrace, relief flooding him. She was thinner, bruises yellowing along her cheekbones, but her spirit burned bright. "How did you—" "I bribed one of Victor's old men. He hates Claudia more than he loves money," she said, eyes glinting. "But we have to be careful. She's planning to claim your designs as hers, then kill you after the show." His stomach turned. "I know." Julia gripped his hands. "We need allies." "Enzo," Nico said. She nodded slowly. "He wants to topple Claudia. If we offer him a way to humiliate her publicly." They hatched a desperate plan under the cold stars, a finale dress so revolutionary it would eclipse Claudia's entire collection, and reveal to the world who the true designer was. The next weeks were a blur of stolen nights and whispered meetings. Julia flitted between shadows, gathering scraps of information on Claudia's sabotage. Enzo hovered nearby, his sharp mind weaving strategies. Nico's designs evolved from sketches to muslin prototypes, a collection inspired by Little Italy's grit and romance, unlike anything Milan had seen. But Claudia's eyes were everywhere. One evening, as Nico pinned delicate lace to a mannequin, Victor stepped from the shadows, his scars twisted in a half-smile. "Careful, ragazzo," he drawled, fingering the edge of a blade. "Your loyalty seems divided." Nico's pulse spiked. He forced himself to keep his hands steady. "I only care about the show." Victor's eyes glittered. "Good. Because your mother's still in New York, yes? And accidents happen so easily." He sauntered off, leaving the scent of stale cologne and cold dread. The night before the show, Enzo called Nico to his private atelier. He pushed a glass of grappa into Nico's hands. "I've watched you," he said. "You have the fire, but do you have the guts?" Nico met his gaze. "I'll do whatever it takes." Enzo smiled grimly. "Then tomorrow, during Claudia's big finale, we swap the final gown for yours." Cameras will capture it live, and the world will know who the real genius is. Nico's heart thundered with hope. They shook hands, an unholy alliance forged in desperation. On the day of the show, the air inside La Scala Theater crackled with anticipation. Fashion royalty filled the velvet seats. Claudia basked in the attention, eyes shining with triumph. Enzo slipped backstage, nodding to Nico as they prepared the final switch. Backstage, chaos reigned. Makeup artists shrieking, models teetering in stilettos, stylists fighting over last-second adjustments. But Nico moved with laser focus. His final dress, black silk sliced into floating panels like shattered glass, waiting in a hidden garment bag. Just before the finale, Julia appeared at his side, breathless. "It's done," she whispered. "Claudia thinks her dress is still in place." Enzo clapped him on the shoulder. "Go make history." Nico guided the final model, a willowy woman with fierce eyes, into his creation. As she stepped onto the runway, the crowd fell silent. Gasps rose, cameras flashed. The dress shimmered with every step, a storm of movement and light. Claudia's smile froze into horror. She lunged to model but was held back by Enzo's men. On stage, the Bellini name vanished in a blaze of brilliance as Nico's design stole the spotlight. Backstage monitors showed live feeds of social media exploding. #Romano trending worldwide. But victory was short-lived. A scream tore through the chaos. Nico turned to see a grainy photo slip from an envelope. A picture of Rosa, bound and gagged, eyes wide with terror. Nico stared at the photo, his mother's eyes wild with terror. His breath came in ragged gasps. The roar of the crowd beyond the runway sounded muffled, as though underwater. The world shrank to Claudia's cold gaze and the shaking image of Rosa bound and gagged. 48 hours, Claudia repeated, each syllable sharp as a needle. You will finish the collection. You will sign it over to me, and you'll keep your mouth shut, or your mother dies screaming. Julia grabbed his arm, pulling him into the shadows backstage. Nico. He shook his head wildly. They have her, Julia. I can't let her die. She cupped his face, eyes fierce. Then we find a way to save her and beat Claudia. But not alone. That night, Enzo summoned him to his penthouse overlooking the city skyline. The windows reflected candlelight across their drawn faces. Enzo poured them each a glass of blood-red Barolo. I warned you Bellini wouldn't give up easily, he said, swirling his wine. She's more dangerous than you know. And Victor, he's not just muscle. He's connected to someone bigger. Nico's eyes narrowed. The Don? Enzo nodded. The same Don who controls New York's garment district. The same Don your father tried to protect you from. The words felt like a hammer blow. Memories of hushed arguments in the tailor's shop, bloody envelopes, Salvatore's haunted eyes. It all clicked into place. My father, he was working with him. Julia placed a hand on his. He was trying to keep you safe. Enzo leaned forward, voice low. Here's the deal. Nico, help me destroy Claudia, and I'll use my contacts to get your mother out. I want your genius, but you keep your name. Nico hesitated. He had every reason to distrust Enzo, but his mother's life was on the line, and if Claudia won, he'd lose everything anyway. Deal, he said finally. They spent the next day working feverishly. Julia coordinated secret calls to contacts in New York, tracing the men who'd abducted Rosa. Enzo called in favors from powerful friends across Milan. Nico, exhausted but relentless, sketched day and night, pushing himself beyond anything he thought possible. He crafted a dozen pieces inspired by his past, bold pinstripes for the suits he'd stitched in Little Italy, delicate embroidery of roses for his mother's name, sharp lines reflecting the violence he'd survived. Each design was a silent scream of defiance, but Claudia wasn't blind. On the second night, she stormed into the studio with Victor at her side. His eyes glimmered with cruel amusement. You think I don't know what you're planning? Claudia hissed, sweeping Nico's sketches from the table. You think you can embarrass me twice? She turned on Julia, eyes flashing. And you little jade, I should have killed you in New York. Victor stepped forward, knife glinting under the fluorescent lights. Nico moved instinctively, shielding Julia with his body. "Stop," he shouted. "You need me. Kill me and you'll have nothing." Claudia's lip curled. "You're right," she spat, then grabbed Nico's prototype dress, a flowing silk gown studded with crystal beads, and slashed it to ribbons with Victor's knife. 40 hours left," she said, eyes burning with hate. "Make me something better, or your mother's blood will be on your hands." After Claudia left, the silence felt suffocating. Julia picked up the shredded fabric with trembling hands. "She's insane." Enzo stepped closer. "This changes nothing," he said. "We have backup patterns. We'll rebuild." Nico swallowed hard, forcing down despair. "We don't have time." Julia took his face in her hands. "Then we make time." The three of them worked through the night. Enzo called in master seamstresses who owed him favors, their needles flying like lightning. Nico redrafted patterns at breakneck speed, creating a new finale piece from midnight black velvet that rippled like oil under the lights. Julia handled logistics, bribing stagehands, booking an emergency time slot at Milan's busiest venue, using stolen credentials from Claudia's own team. By dawn, the prototype was ready. It was Nico's boldest creation yet, a sculptural dress that blended masculine and feminine lines, fierce yet fragile, embodying the tension between his past and his dreams. That morning, Enzo received a call. He put it on speaker. A distorted voice crackled. The old woman's in a warehouse outside Milan, guarded by 4 men, but they're moving her tonight. Nico's chest tightened. Julia gripped his hand. Enzo met his eyes. "We get her. Tonight." But even as they planned, Claudia's moves came faster. Police raided Enzo's studio on trumped-up charges. Bribes dried up as Claudia blackmailed Enzo's contacts. Models were threatened, some quitting hours before the show. In a final blow, Julia received a package containing one of Rosa's earrings, streaked with blood. Nico fell to his knees, clutching it. The message was clear. Claudia wasn't bluffing. Yet even as the world closed in, Enzo made one last call to a contact deep in the Milan underworld who specialized in quiet removals. The man agreed to extract Rosa during the chaos of the show in exchange for a favor Enzo refused to name. As darkness fell, Nico dressed the final model in the reborn finale gown. The air backstage vibrated with fear and hope. He kissed Julia, lingering in the moment. "If this goes wrong." She silenced him. "Then we burn together." Enzo handed him a small earpiece. "My man is on site at the warehouse. You'll hear everything." As the lights dimmed and the music swelled, Nico stepped to the edge of the stage, heart pounding in sync with the audience's applause. His design swept the runway one by one, raw, electric, unmistakably his. In his ear, a voice crackled, "Going in now." But before the finale could begin, Claudia appeared beside him, face pale but eyes blazing with manic triumph. She leaned in, breath hot against his ear. "You think you've won," she whispered. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Then his earpiece erupted with gunfire, shouts, screams, a man yelling, "It's a trap!" The finale music thundered through La Scala's Guilda Hall as Nico staggered backward, earpiece buzzing with chaos. The words "Rosa's gone" echoed like a death knell in his mind. His vision blurred. On the runway, his masterpiece dress floated under the lights, dazzling the crowd with every step. But applause sounded hollow, distant, like a funeral march. Claudia watching from the wings, lips curled in sadistic satisfaction. "You hear, don't you?" she purred, eyes glinting. "She's gone. And soon you will be too." A storm of rage and terror rose in him, but he forced himself to focus. Cameras flashed as the final model posed, capturing the breathtaking silhouette of his design. The audience was on its feet, gasping, cheering, some in tears. This was his moment. This was his name. Until Claudia stepped onto the runway. The crowd hushed. In the glare of spotlights, she raised her arms, soaking up the adoration. "Thank you," she announced, voice magnified through the theater. "This collection is mine. A tribute to my genius, Claudia Bellini." Nico's breath caught. The world was watching. If he let her steal this moment, Everything would be lost. But before he could act, Enzo burst from backstage, microphone in hand. He pointed at Claudia, voice sharp as a blade. "You're a fraud. These designs belong to Nico Romano." The room exploded in shocked gasps. Cameras swung wildly. Social media feeds lit up with frenzied commentary. Security guards surged forward, trying to drag Enzo away. But he wrestled free, shoving a stack of Nico's signed sketches into the hands of a prominent fashion journalist at the foot of the runway. "These are his originals. Dates, signatures, everything. Check them." Claudia lunged at Enzo, shrieking, but tripped over the trailing hem of a gown. She crashed to the floor as flashes captured every humiliating second. The spell broke. Murmurs rippled through the audience like an oncoming wave. Backstage, Victor emerged from the shadows, eyes locked on Nico like a shark scenting blood. His pistol glinted under the stage lights. "You're dead," Victor snarled. Panic swept the wings. Models screamed, scattering like startled birds. Stagehands ducked behind props. Nico ducked as Victor fired, the shot cracking overhead, shattering a spotlight that rained glass across the runway. Enzo tackled Victor, the two men rolling into a tangle of fists and curses. The gun clattered across the stage. Nico dove for it, fingers brushing cold steel, but Claudia's stiletto heel slammed onto his hand. Pain exploded up his arm. She kicked the gun away, eyes wild. This was supposed to be mine. From the earpiece came crackling updates. "She's gone. They're moving her again. We lost them." His mother's fate twisted like a knife in his gut. Enzo roared, throwing Victor off him. He grabbed Claudia by the collar, dragging her to the edge of the stage as the police, alerted by the gunfire, poured into the theater. Officers surrounded the runway, weapons drawn. The audience stampeded for the exits, trampling seats in their desperation. Victor seized the gun once more, raising it at Nico. Time slowed. He could see the whites of Victor's eyes, the finger tightening on the trigger. A single shot rang out. Victor jerked, a small red flower blooming in his chest. He staggered, eyes wide, before crashing through a rolling clothes rack, disappearing beneath a cascade of gowns. Enzo stood behind him, smoking gun in hand, breathing ragged. Sirens wailed outside as the theater filled with blue lights. Police cuffed Claudia, dragging her off the runway screaming. "It was mine! Mine!" Journalists caught every word, every crazed expression. Enzo dropped the gun, eyes haunted. "We need to go. Now!" Julia appeared beside Nico, face pale but determined. She pulled him toward the service exit. Together, they fled through back corridors reeking of dust and old paint, bursting into an alley choked with swirling snow and flashing lights. A black SUV skidded around the corner, headlights blinding. Enzo's driver threw open the doors. They dove inside as tires screeched, the car fishtailing before accelerating into the night. In the back seat, Julia cradled Nico's face. "We did it," she whispered, but her eyes were shadowed with fear. "But your mother—" He pulled the earpiece from his ear, voice hollow. "They took her somewhere else. We don't know where." Enzo swore under his breath, pounding the seat. "The Don's pulling the strings. He'll use her to drag you back to New York." They sped through Milan's labyrinthine streets, sirens wailing behind them. Enzo's phone buzzed. He put on speaker. A shaky voice whispered, "Warehouse was a setup. We're tracking the van, heading to the airport. Private plane waiting." Nico's heart clenched. He imagined Rosa terrified in a dark cargo hold, men with cold eyes standing over her. He clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. "We're going after them," he said. Enzo nodded, eyes flashing. "I'll call my contacts in customs. They won't get far." They reached Enzo's safe house on the outskirts of the city, an old textile mill converted into a fortress of steel doors and watchful eyes. Inside, they pored over flight schedules, maps, and security feeds. Julia hacked into airport CCTV, eyes darting across screens. "There!" she gasped, pointing. Grainy footage showed a hunched figure in a gray coat. Rosa, being hustled across the tarmac toward a waiting jet. 4 men flanked her. Enzo slammed his fist onto the table. "They're airborne in 20 minutes. Nico's phone buzzed with a private number. He answered. A voice oozing venom seeped through the line. Romano, you embarrass my associates. But you're out of your league. If you want your mother alive, come back to New York, alone. The line went dead. The room fell silent except for Nico's ragged breathing. He turned to Enzo and Julia, eyes blazing. I'm going home, and I'm ending this. Julia's eyes filled with tears. Then I'm coming with you. Enzo shook his head. No, I'll follow separately. If we all go together, we'll be easier to spot. But remember, in New York, the Don owns everything. The midnight sky over New York glowed orange with city lights as Nico's plane descended into JFK. He watched the skyline rise like jagged teeth in the darkness. Home, but now a battlefield. Julia and Enzo were still hours behind him. He was on his own. Customs was a blur. He emerged into the terminal, heart pounding, scanning the sea of faces. His burner phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Taxi stand. Black Lincoln. Nico hesitated, then slipped outside into the humid July night. The car idled at the curb. A man in a Yankees cap gestured him in without a word. The driver's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. You want your mother, Romano? You'll come quietly. Nico kept his expression cold, but his mind raced. He counted the turns as they left the airport, Van Wyck Expressway, a hard right onto Queens Boulevard, heading toward the old warehouses near the East River, the place he'd been warned never to go. They arrived at a derelict garment factory, its broken windows staring like hollow eyes. Two men waited by the entrance, each with bulges beneath their jackets. Nico stepped out, forced calm over his quaking nerves. I'm here. Where's my mother? They frisked him roughly, taking his phone and wallet, before shoving him through rusted doors into a vast, darkened space. The air smelled of oil, mold, and ancient dust. A single pool light revealed Rosa, tied to a chair. Her gray hair hung in limp strands over her face, but her eyes burned fierce and alive when they found Nico. Tears welled in his own. Well, isn't this touching? A gravelly voice drawled. The Don stepped into the light, an older man, elegant in a tailored pinstripe suit. His right hand glistened with a ruby ring, the same ring Nico had seen in his father's possession years ago. Romano, the Don said softly, I knew your father well, a good man, but weak. Are you weak, too? Nico swallowed hard. Let her go. I'm the one you want. The Don smiled thinly. You're right about that. You see, your family owes a debt. And now, you're going to pay by making me the silent owner of your precious Romano brand. He slid a thick contract across the floor. Sign this. I take 75% of your profits. You keep your life. Rosa choked out. Don't you dare, Nico. Before he could answer, a deafening crash echoed through the warehouse. Floodlights snapped on, blinding everyone as shouts rang out. Enzo's voice bellowed across the cavernous space. NYPD, get down. A phalanx of armored officers stormed in, weapons raised. The Don's guard scattered, gunfire erupting in staccato bursts. Nico dove behind a stack of crates, bullets splintering what around him. Through the chaos, he saw Enzo wrestling with one of the Don's lieutenants. Another man lunged for Rosa, but Julia emerged from the shadows, swinging a steel pipe with a cry, cracking across the thug's skull. The Don tried to flee, ducking through a side door. Nico chased him, adrenaline pumping, boots slamming across cracked concrete. They burst onto a metal catwalk high above the factory floor. Wind howled through broken windows. Below, muzzle flashes and screams punctuated the night. The Don spun, raising a silenced pistol. It didn't have to end this way, he hissed. Nico hurled himself forward as the gun fired. White-hot pain lanced across his side, but momentum carried him into the Don, driving him into the railing. The old man roared, grappling for the gun, but Nico slammed his fist into his face again and again. With a final desperate shove, the Don toppled over the catwalk rail, plummeting 2 stories to the concrete below with a sickening thud. Silence fell. Gunfire died out as the last of the Don's men were subdued by Enzo's squad. Nico staggered down, clutching his bleeding side. Julia met him halfway, eyes wide with terror. "You're hurt." He waved her off, heart thundering. "My mother?" Rosa limped toward them, free at last, tears streaming down her cheeks. Nico caught her in his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. Enzo approached, face bruised but triumphant. "NYPD will find the Don's body. Your name will be cleared." He was the last one holding the strings. Nico looked around at the battered factory, the flashing red and blue lights, the press already swarming outside. He exhaled a shuddering breath. It was over, or so he thought. As dawn broke, Julia wrapped his wound and held his hand. Rosa rested, leaning on Enzo's shoulder. But the world was already moving again. Hours later, at Enzo's Manhattan apartment, the group watched the news. Bellini Empire collapses amid criminal scandal, the anchor declared. Claudia, in handcuffs, was shown screaming at cameras as police led her away. Victor's death was ruled a homicide in self-defense. "This is just the beginning," Enzo murmured, dropping a worn leather notebook on the table. "We found this in the Don's pocket." Nico flipped through pages of coded transactions, overseas shell companies, and a final ominous entry. "Contact, the Red Crane, Tokyo." Julia frowned. "What's the Red Crane?" Enzo's face darkened. "A powerful investor network. They bought stakes in European and American brands before, only to gut them for profit. If they're moving on Romano, your troubles aren't over." Nico clenched his jaw. He looked at his mother and Julia, then at the skyline beyond the window, the city glittering with promise and peril. "Then we fight," he said, "this time on our terms." The Romano atelier in Manhattan smelled of fresh silk, scorched wool, and ambition. Under new floodlights, tailors worked furiously to meet impossible deadlines. Nico moved to them like a conductor, checking stitches, adjusting hems, every movement driven by a single purpose: to reclaim his name. He stepped onto the rooftop terrace as dawn spilled gold across the city. Julia joined him, her eyes still rimmed with exhaustion. "The invitations are out," she said softly. "Every buyer, critic, and socialite worth a damn will be there tonight." "Good," Nico said. His jaw was set, every line of his face hard with resolve. "This show will either save us or finish us." Downstairs, Rosa sat with Enzo, both poring over the Don's old ledger. Enzo traced a line of entries with a callous finger. "These shell companies laundered millions through your father's tailor shop," he said quietly. "They're still active. If we can flip them, we might fund your new line without the investors' poison." Rosa's eyes were weary but fierce. "My husband thought he was protecting us by staying in the life. I won't let it bury you, too." Nico rejoined them, holding up a design sketch. "Romano is mine. If they want it, they'll have to kill me first." Hours later, the showroom filled with an electric mix of the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers sparkled over rows of seats draped in black velvet. Journalists whispered about Nico's survival, his rumored mob ties, and his bold comeback. The first model stepped onto the runway wearing a sharply tailored suit of charcoal silk, embroidered with subtle red cranes, the symbol of defiance. Each piece that followed was an evolution. Slash gowns symbolizing betrayal, reconstructed jackets representing reinvention. Applause rose, wave after wave, until the room shook with it. Julia watched from the wings, clutching Rosa's hand. Enzo hovered near the exit, scanning every guest. They all knew the real show was happening offstage. A ripple went to the crowd as a tall man took a seat in the front row. His bespoke suit was flawless, his hair slicked back like obsidian. On his lapel, a tiny red crane gleamed. Eyes turned to him in hushed awe. He was a ghost from Japan's corporate underworld. Nico's eyes locked on him as he took the stage for his bow. The man smiled thinly and raised a single hand, like a conductor starting a symphony. Moments later, Julia gasped. Rosa slumped in her chair, champagne flute falling from her grasp, glass shattering. Her skin turned pale as wax. Screams erupted. Enzo was at Rosa's side instantly, checking her pulse, then glaring at the tray of drinks. "Poisoned," he spat. His eyes met Nico's across the room. Security tried to clear the runway, but chaos reigned as guests stampeded for the exits, desperate to avoid the violence they sensed blooming in the air. Nico dropped to his knees beside Rosa, tears blurring his vision. "Stay with me, Mama," he whispered hoarsely. But her breath was shallow, eyes fluttering closed. Paramedics burst in, pushing Nico aside as they worked feverishly. Julia sobbed against his shoulder. Enzo grabbed him by the arm. "This was meant for you," he growled. "That bastard in the front row, he's Red Crane." A single word hissed in Nico's mind: war. He stood shakily as Rosa was wheeled out on a stretcher, sirens already wailing outside. The last guest streamed past, some glancing back with horrified fascination. The cameras never stopped rolling. Every second broadcast live, every expression of grief and fury immortalized. Minutes later, the runway was empty. Shadows lingered where the models had once dazzled. Nico walked its length alone, heart pounding like a funeral drum. He turned to find a Red Crane executive waiting at the end, flanked by 2 bodyguards. "You survived," the man said softly, his accent precise. "That's admirable, but your brand is vulnerable. Accept our buyout, or watch everyone you love die." Nico met his gaze without flinching. "You know who I am now. You think I'll bow to you?" The man's mouth curved into a cold smile. "I don't think. I know." Suddenly, a piercing wail cut the air. Police cars screamed up to the entrance, tires screeching. Enzo stepped forward, gun raised. "This ends now." The Red Crane guards reached inside their jackets. Nico lunged, grabbing a metal stanchion and swinging it in a wild arc, knocking one guard sprawling. Julia appeared from the wings with fire extinguisher, blasting the second guard with white foam. The Red Crane man slipped backward on the foam-slick marble, cursing as he hit the ground. Enzo tackled him, wrenching his arm behind his back. Cops flooded in, weapons drawn, cuffing everyone in sight. As officers dragged the Red Crane man away, he met Nico's eyes. "We will rebuild." "We always do," he said calmly. "And you, Romano, you will never rest." Enzo clapped Nico on the shoulder. "He's right. This isn't over." In the hospital hours later, Rosa stirred, eyelids fluttering. Julia sobbed in relief. Nico held his mother's frail hand, determination steeling his spine. On the TV in the waiting room, news anchor screamed, "Romano defies assassination attempt. Show ends in chaos." He looked to Julia. "They want to end me because they know what I'm capable of." She kissed his bruised knuckles. "Then show them." Back at the atelier the next morning, Enzo laid out a new plan. Dismantle every shell company still linked to the Don, rebuild the brand with independent investors, and take the fight global. Julia presented documents proving the Red Crane had illegally seized design patents in Europe. "We'll sue them in every country they think they own," she said fiercely. Nico looked out over the Manhattan skyline, sun blazing between the towers. "They tried to kill my mother. They tried to kill me. Now I'm coming for them." The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft beep of monitors and the rustling of the newspaper Nico held in trembling hands. "Romano defies death. Again," the headline blared. But it was the second article that chilled him. "Red Crane tied to Tokyo crime syndicate. U.S. authorities investigate." Nico folded the paper slowly, watching his mother sleep. Rose had stabilized, but poison still threaded through her bloodstream like smoke. He reached out, brushing a strand of silver hair from her forehead. "I won't let them touch you again," he whispered. Back at the atelier, Julia met him with a storm in her eyes. "You need to see this," she said, dragging him to the office. Enzo sat at the desk, pale and grim, a single photo blown up on the screen. It was from a Red Crane shareholder meeting in Tokyo. And standing in the background, aged but unmistakable, was Marco Romano, Nico's father. Alive. "No," Nico breathed. "That's impossible." Enzo nodded solemnly. "It's real." He faked his death. Disappeared 30 years ago after a deal with the Don went south. Changed his name, moved to Japan, and rebuilt the empire. Only this time, with cleaner stitches. Nico stared at the photo, the man's sharp cheekbones and proud chin unmistakable. "He let us starve. He left Mama to raise me alone. Julius squeezed his hand. Maybe he was protecting you. Or maybe, Nico said coldly, he sold us out to survive. Enzo slid a file across the desk. There's more. We intercepted a wire transfer, $10 million from Red Crane to Claudia Bellini, for years ago, right before she recruited you. Julia froze. So Claudia wasn't just using Nico's talent. She was following orders. And worse, Enzo added, we found birth records. Claudia wasn't lying. She was your half-sister. Same father. Different mothers. Nico felt the room spin around him. Why didn't anyone tell me? He demanded. Enzo sighed. Because your father made sure no one would. He erased records, paid off witnesses. If not for the Don's old ledger, we'd never have known. Julia sat back, stunned. So everything, Claudia's betrayal, the attacks, even the Red Crane interest, all started with Marco. Nico's face darkened. Then we finish it with Marco. That night, Nico returned to the Bronx, his old neighborhood, full of ghosts. He found what was left of the Romano tailor shop, shuttered and falling apart. The sign was cracked, the windows smashed, but inside, he found a box beneath the floorboards. Inside were blueprints, letters, and a journal, his father's. The pages were yellowed, written in rushed, slanted Italian. I never meant to leave them, but if I stay, they die. The Don has my soul. Maybe in Japan I can start clean. Claudia will grow strong. She'll protect Nico, even if he hates her. The last entry. If Nico ever finds this, I'm sorry, but I chose survival. Now he must choose legacy. Nico returned to the atelier at dawn, hollow-eyed, but resolved. I'm going to Tokyo, he told Enzo. Alone. Julia stepped forward. Not a chance. You need backup. And besides, your father might be a monster, but he's still your blood. Enzo handed him a sleek USB drive. These are the encrypted accounts your father left behind. They trace everything. If we expose him in Japan, we burn Red Crane to the ground. 3 days later, Nico stood beneath the soaring skyline of Tokyo, an alien city of metal and glass, neon and shadow. He wore a jet-black suit of his own design, stitched with silver thread only visible under certain light. Julia flanked him. Enzo watched from a safe house, preparing the press drop. They arrived at the Red Crane Tower, where the top floor was guarded like a fortress. But Nico didn't hesitate. He walked straight into the lion's den. Marco Romano sat like a ghost of the past, his once dark hair gone silver, his eyes sharp as broken glass. Nico, he said, standing slowly, you've grown. Nico stared at him, fists clenched. You left us to rot. Mama cried herself to sleep every night. I buried you in my mind years ago. Marco's expression flickered with pain. I did what I had to. The Don was going to kill you both. Julia stepped forward. You didn't protect him. You built a throne on his suffering. Marco glanced at her. You must be the girl from Milan. I saw the footage. You have fire. Nico cut in. Don't talk to her. This is between us. Marco walked to the window, overlooking the city. You're here to kill me? No, Nico said, voice like ice. I'm here to take everything you built and burn it. He slid the USB drive across the desk. Everything is on there. Fraud, bribes, murders. And the world's press will have it in 20 minutes unless you sign Romano back to me fully. Marco's face remained unreadable. You destroy the company over ego? This isn't about ego, Nico said. It's about blood. Mine, my mother's, Enzo's, Julia's. Yours doesn't count anymore. Suddenly, the door burst open. Red Crane guards stormed in, guns drawn. Marco raised a hand. Let them go. The guards hesitated. I said go. Marco snapped. They left, silent as shadows. I built this empire with blood, Marco said quietly. But I always hoped you'd return. You made me proud, even if you hate me. Nico turned away, disgusted. You don't get that satisfaction. You raised an empire, but lost your soul. Julia slipped her hand into his. Marco walked to the desk, signed the transfer papers, and slid them across. I'll disappear, he said. For good this time. Nico didn't look back. The next day, the story exploded worldwide. Red crane collapses under Romano leak. Fashion tycoon vanishes. Julia, Enzo, and Nico return to New York, weary but victorious. At Rosa's bedside, Nico placed the signed documents in her lap. She opened her eyes and smiled. "Your father?" she rasped. "Gone." Nico said, "But I kept the name." In a downtown courtroom, Claudia Bellini stood trial. She watched the verdict read, guilty without blinking. But as she was led away, she smirked. "I'll be back," she whispered to Nico as she passed. Half-blood or not, we're still family. 6 months later, the skyline of New York shimmered behind a glittering white pavilion erected in Bryant Park. Beneath the floodlights and camera flashes, it wasn't just another fashion week. It was the rebirth of an empire. Romano, blood-stitched, soul-seamed, read the banners. The world was watching. Inside, Nico adjusted the cuff of his midnight blue jacket, his eyes flicking to the guest list. Every seat was taken. Celebrities, editors, critics, and industry giants. Even the mayor of New York had RSVP'd. But Nico's eyes were searching for 2 seats in particular. Rosa sat in the front row, proud, regal in a black and gold gown her son had made just for her. Next to her was an empty seat for Enzo Russo. He never made out of Tokyo. Flashback 2 weeks earlier. Enzo, recovering in a Tokyo clinic, had waved Nico off with a crooked smile. "You have to go. New York needs you. Romano needs you. I'll be there for the encore." But the call came days later. Enzo's heart gave out. Too many years of smoke, bullets, and secrets. Nico didn't speak for 3 days. But now, standing at the edge of the runway, Enzo's lighter was in his pocket, engraved with one word. Famiglia. The lights dimmed. A voiceover began, Nico's own, recorded the night before. "This brand isn't just fashion. It's survival. It's every stitch my mother sewed in the dark, every bruise we hid, every lie we told to stay alive. This is for the ones who thought they'd never make it out of the gutter. This is for those who did." The curtain parted. Models stormed the runway in pieces inspired by Little Italy and Milan. Old-world tailoring fused with modern flair. Street-smart silhouettes paired with fine silks. Hand-sewn rose motifs stitched from the same thread, Rosa, once used on suits in their broken shop. And at the finale, Julia herself walked the runway, wearing the wedding gown Nico had spent months perfecting. Sleek, fearless, stitched with white satin and shadow lace. As she walked, tears streamed down Nico's face. This was it. They'd won. Backstage, chaos reigned. Applause, reporters, security, champagne. But Nico only saw Julia. "You killed it," he whispered, pulling her in. "You are the collection." She kissed him, laughing. "We did it. Now let's go build our life." But Rosa appeared behind them, clutching a letter. Nico opened it slowly. Inside, a photo of Marco Romano, smiling on a beach. A note scrawled on the back in his looping Italian script. "I told you I'd disappear, but I couldn't resist seeing you one last time. Your name is safe. Protect it, honor it, and never forget, our sins are stitched into our seams. But you chose to wear yours with pride. That's what makes you a true Romano. Love, Papa." Days later, Nico and Julia stood in a quiet chapel in Umbria, far from cameras, far from New York. Julia wore a simpler version of her runway dress. Nico stood across from her, hands shaking slightly. "I was stitched from ash and broken promises," he whispered during their vows. "But you rewrote every thread." Julia smiled through tears. "Then let's make our own fabric." They kissed under a shower of white rose petals as Rosa looked on, tears slipping into her smile. Back in New York, a new plaque was mounted outside the original Romano tailor shop, now rebuilt into a museum and design school. The Romano legacy, from Little Italy to the world. Inside, the first display was Nico's childhood sketchbook. Torn, coffee-stained, brilliant. Behind it, the first suit he ever stitched with his father, and a note beneath it. Greatness isn't inherited. It's made one stitch at a time. 1 year later, at Paris Fashion Week, the buzz wasn't just about Romano's new line, but about its new global partner. A Japanese tech and luxury conglomerate, Hikari Group, had acquired 49% of the brand. Under one condition: complete creative control remained with Nico Romano. In the press conference, Nico stood tall. "I don't make clothes," he said. "I make armor for people who never thought they'd be seen." That night, in a dark corner of Paris, Claudia Bellini, now out on parole, watched the press conference on a dusty TV. A quiet smile played on her lips. "He did it," she whispered. Behind her, a young apprentice sketched in a journal labeled Bellini Designs, Rebirth. Claudia's eyes glinted. Maybe it's time to sew something new. Nico stood atop the Romano Tower in Manhattan. The skyline stretched before him. In his hand, Enzo's lighter. Beside him, Julia, holding his newborn daughter, wrapped in silk stitch from scraps of his old sketchbook covers. "What should we name her?" Julia asked. Nico smiled, brushing the baby's hair. "Hope," he said, "because everything beautiful starts in darkness." He clicked the lighter once, then again. A flame bloomed small but steady. Just like him. This is a Stories Box episode. Subscribe to follow our stories. Till next time, thank you for watching.